Good morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Thursday, the 12th day of June, 2025. It is Thursday of the 10th week of the year, the 10th week in Ordinary Time. So after going to Barnabas yesterday and Acts of the Apostles, now we go back to 2 Corinthians, again, where Paul is writing to the church in Corinth. And he kind of makes what can seem to be a outrageous and inflammatory statement in talking about how whenever people read Moses, basically a veil is placed over what is being said or over them because they do not understand, and things like that, and it can be very discrediting of the law of Moses and even the Old Testament itself. But what Paul, it seems, is trying to get at, because remember, there isn't a sharp desire in Paul to break from Judaism, but there is always the understanding of the fulfillment of Judaism in Christ, which again itself can be inflammatory at this time and in a lot of times too. And so the thing about it is it's understanding and expectation and waiting for fulfillments that Moses talks about. And so he says, basically, for those who believe in what it is that we preach, that veil has been lifted. The promised fulfillment that God has spoken about in Moses has now been given in the life of Jesus of Nazareth. And so it's to listen in that regard and to believe in this regard, which was always the hardest point, amongst Paul's discussions and his preaching, I guess, with Jewish communities, for them to believe that everything could be fulfilled in what it means for, again, a God to die, for Christ, if he is indeed God, to have been crucified on a cross, and then been raised. Again, that very important part of it, that crucial part of it, which is the most unbelievable for many people, and the most difficult to get around and to get over disbelief regarding. But again, this is where, looking now as we move to the fourth day out of the passage of Easter, we are called again to be people. How do we preach this so that it makes sense? How do we preach, again, that light has conquered darkness, and the darkness can have no more power over us, as Paul says? How do we preach in a way that shows fulfillment of God's promises through what it is that we believe and through what it is that we do and what it is that we say? Again, we are the ones responsible for this now. We do not preach ourselves. We do not preach what it is that we just want to preach just because we like what we have to say. But we preach, again, as Paul says, Jesus who is Lord, and Jesus who was crucified and risen, who is Lord. And that is something, again, that we all have to wrestle with many times. As unbelievable, again, as resurrection can be, and the new life that is promised through resurrection can be, it still is. And how do we live? Again, trying to understand that and lift the veil in our hearts that stops us from believing more and more. In the Gospel day of Matthew, it's one of these great parts, again, from Godspell, if you know that musical, in which, again, Jesus, talks about our righteousness having surpassed the scribes and the Pharisees. If that's what we want, again, that's the whole point. Is that what we want? Is just to be more righteous than anybody else? Or are we trying, again, to live a life that is attentive, to our needs, that is attentive to what it is that people need, and to be of support and care for each other? And so this Gospel passage kind of ends, with that sense where if you have somebody with whom you have an issue with, reconcile with them first before you take them to court. Because if you take them to court, you open up all kinds of doors that do not lead maybe to the best possible solutions, the best possible resolutions, to your situation. Again, it's like, be attentive always, again, to what it is that we say and what it is that we mean when we say things to each other. Because, if we are not, then our righteousness really matters not. And trying to be more righteous than anybody else only ends up perhaps with more heartache and more burdens placed upon ourselves needlessly. A continued blessed day, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord give you his peace.